So, I was talking with my therapist last week, and one thing I mentioned was that I didn't love the fact that my video on Rip Wild Hearthstone was so popular and yet so negative, because there's lots of content that I put a lot of good energy into that doesn't do nearly as well and took me a lot more time. But one thing that he pointed out to me is that it might not be the negativity that resonated with people so much, but rather the authenticity. In this case, it was a video that I filmed. I didn't do any editing on whatsoever. I just uploaded the raw footage, and that was that. Today, I want to do something similar and capture that authenticity, but not be so necessarily negative in talking about the topic that I often see in pretty much every YouTube comment section about Wild, and that is whether or not Wild should be wild. So this thought came to me because today I saw Zeddy's video, which was in large part responding to my video about the decline of Wild Hearthstone this year. And I think there are a lot of problems, and if you're curious to know what I think those problems are, then you can watch that video or Zeddy's video for more information. But today, in Zeddy's comment section saying, Wild should be wild, and basically what they are saying when they say that is that they don't want Blizzard to touch Wild at all, that people who ask for changes are silly, that Wild should stay as it is, and Blizzard should have a totally hands-off design philosophy, and things should be totally broken. There are other variants of this argument, but this is the most common one that I see presented, and so today that's the one I'm going to talk about, though there are a lot of similar arguments that will get covered by this video as well. Early on in the Wild format, it was the same thing as Standard, but just with a couple expansions different. In that case, a lot of people probably developed this opinion about how Wild should be wild. Because at that time, there was really no need to change Wild, right? If things were a little bit broken, that's okay. That's the way the format's supposed to be. But then Blizzard started going a little bit crazy with the decks that became popular in Wild. There were a lot of busted things that came before this, but I want to talk about the one that I'm most familiar with, which is Snip Snap Warlock. So in my opinion, Wild has never been more wild than when Snip Snap Warlock was king. And the reason for that is that it is objectively the most wild deck of all time. Nothing has been and probably never will be more wild than turn 4 OTKs with charge and pretty much all of the things that Snip Snap was capable of doing. And because of this, people quit the game. Right now on NA, there are about 2,000 wild legends. And there could be a bit more, but one thing that we know for a fact is that there were definitely less than 200 some months NA during the Snip Snap meta. And of course it was a different ladder, but even if you say it's twice as hard as the old system, well, in that case, there were still 5 times less people playing than there are today. And I would say today the Wild meta isn't even that great, and people are still playing a lot more than they did back then. Blizzard knows that people don't necessarily cast a ballot when they vote on how the game should be changed. They vote with their feet. And so if Snip Snap is popular and you stop playing the game, Blizzard takes note. And eventually they did step in and change that. People who want Wild as wild don't understand that Blizzard's rare but necessary changes to the format are the only reason it's still alive today. And in fact, if you had a Wild as wild meta today, I would bet that pretty much all of you watching this video, whether you want to admit it or not, would actually not be playing Wild if that were the case. You might play a couple games here or there of some busted combo deck, and then you get comboed on 3 games in a row, and you say, you know what, this isn't for me, I'm going back to another format. If you look at the balance of Standard, especially during the Scalaman's meta, you had like 4 tier 1 decks. They were all really close to 50% in win rate, super balanced, and then there was a massive tier 2, a bunch more decks that could see play that were all decent. And in Wild right now, you don't see that. We have a larger card pool now than we've ever had. We have a lot of archetypes that could totally see play, but they're just dumpstered by Priest. There are probably 10, 20 decks that could be totally playable that we just never see because the top decks eat it up. All of this is leading up to what I think Wild should be, and that is wild, but not that wild. And what this means is that when there's a disproportionate strategy that is super unfun or super strong relative to everything else in the meta, then it is on Blizzard to just tune that down a little bit. I think if a deck is at tier 1 and has like 60% plus win rates, then all Blizzard needs to do is touch the cards that are disproportionately good in the deck and bring them down to about tier 2. There are some simple changes in every meta that would work to do this, and it shocks me that Blizzard isn't interested in these changes as far as we've seen. They have made some small changes, but by and large, they refuse to do this unless a deck is so strong that people actually begin to quit the game. I think in the case of Priest, people are beginning to quit the game, and I do expect a change from Blizzard at some point, but historically, they've been a bit late to the ball with some of these changes, and it's hurt Wild time and time again. So, to make it clear, Wild should be wild, but not as wild as people who say that are led to believe. The top decks that are disproportionately good just need to be touched a little bit. A massive tier 1 and tier 2 in Wild is what I would consider healthy, and right now we don't have that. We've had that before, and we can have it again, but we just need Blizzard to be a little bit more active. One final thing that I want to talk about is that a lot of people, including Blizzard, has said in the past that they don't want decks changed because if decks get changed, then people will be upset when their favorite deck gets nerfed. This argument has actually been disputed by none other than Ixar himself. I've referenced this point before, but Ixar said on a podcast that they used to think that when people had their favorite deck nerfed, that they would quit the game. But, as they found out with data, that's not the case. They just move on to another deck or keep playing their nerf deck. So, if we were to implement the changes that I'm asking for today, no specific changes to cards, but just general design philosophy changes, that would mean that people are more happy, they can play more decks, and you just get better player retention overall. All of these things seem like explicit positives for Wild, and therefore Wild should not be that wild. Thanks for watching the video, guys. I am open to doing more of these Wild commentaries in the future, even if I'm not as interested in playing the meta, so let me know if you like this sort of thing, because I can do more of it. Of course, support the video if you like it. Yeah.